All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is our last Sunday of the month, question and answer day. And we got a brief start, and then I remembered I didn't put the recording on. So we have to back up a little bit and put the recording on. Take it away, Neil.
Hi.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask a question about nonviolent communication in general, and also some of the steps from the point of view of someone who uh, I would say is clinically ADHD and has sometimes a difficult time paying attention. What are some techniques that you would recommend for someone in that category to participate and really participate in nonviolent communication?
Well, that's a difficult question for me to answer. And here's the reasons why. First off, I don't know much about ADHD. I don't know anything about it clinically. And what I do know is all anecdotally and suspicions about my own attention deficits. And whether those attention deficits are a disorder or just a randomly occurring thing, I don't know. So it could be dangerous for me to prescribe a particular strategy. It could be, it might not be. But here's what I'm thinking. And again, I don't know enough about ADHD to offer specific sound, actionable advice. But as you were talking about it, one of the things that came to me is a strategy of writing things down. I don't know if the particular situation, again, we're still dealing in generalities, and generalities are a difficult thing to answer. Probably the most hardest thing to answer beyond generalities is hypotheticals. The goalpost always moves in hypotheticals, and in generalities, you just never know all the information, which is fine. I understand, especially if you're dealing on a personal level, you may not want to share everything. So I respect that. And also I need to say that without all that and without training, I really don't know. But I'm just wondering if writing things down as they're happening, making notes, can help. Again, I don't know. This is something that you would have to assess. If the person you're referring to, whether it be yourself or someone else, has a therapist that's helping them with this, then perhaps ask them what strategies could be effectively used for maintaining concentration in rapidly moving conversations. Another thing is to understand how this particular malady affects oneself. Does it make you more prone or less prone to become emotional? Does it make you more prone or less prone to disconnect? Does it cause you to be more prone or less prone to care? Does it cause you to be more or less emotional? Does it cause you to impact your ability to make sound, factual judgments? So all of those, I don't know. How does that all sound to you there, Neil?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I really like the advice of writing things down. That's how I manage a lot of my own professional and even some personal interactions, because I'm a religious note taker. So it makes total sense to me. No, but sometimes, yes, I do think some aspects of communication suffer dramatically. Some benefit, right? I think if you're really, really, really wrapped into a subject, because a lot of people assume ADHD means you can't pay attention. The problem is that sometimes it means you are just absorbed into something, and different phases you have to deal with differently.
Yeah, so that's why it behooves you to know yourself. Other people aren't going to take the time to understand you, generally speaking. I mean, I'm sure you know that by now. Other people could really give a crap. As long as they can put a label on it and generalize it and be done with it and move on to the next topic of the moment, they're fine. If your needs require them to engage in complicated thought processes, you're probably generally out of luck. Unless you can engage them through nonviolent communication, such as when you said this, or when you mentioned that, I felt this way. And I would like to know if that was a correct feeling, if that was what you intended. Also, I would like some help to understand you better. My particular limitations, you don't have to name them. My particular limitations sometimes interfere with my ability to interpret situations. And you could just lead off with that. You could say, I felt this. Sometimes my particular limitations interfere with my ability to assess situations. And I'd like to engage you in this to help me better understand this. So keeping the other person engaged in a constructive way is, and again, we go back to the 3 C's of connection. So, sometimes you don't have to say, or the other person, whoever you're referring to, doesn't have to admit that they have a diagnosable disorder. Rather, they could just say, sometimes it's difficult for me to understand things. Could you help me in this situation better understand you? I don't know. You'd have to see if that works for you or if that seems reasonable. You're on mute.
Sorry, yes, thank you.
Did that answer your question reasonably?
Sure, I think so.
Thank you, Neil. Bill.
Thank you.
Actually, kind of mine is an observation, but it actually kind of ties in nicely with the term labeling. So I'm 5. I was trying to find some dates, but I'm 5 or 6 years into the 10-year commitment that we're supposed to put in to this when we start the practice. I was we're taking mental notes about 3 weeks ago. I think Myosho brought up what have we gained out of our practice or anything. And one example that comes up, probably because of the frustrations it causes, is about 2 weeks ago or thereabouts. I had somebody pull out in front of me, blah, blah, blah. But it was in such a situation where I was all over the road trying to avoid an accident. So it wasn't just somebody cutting me off. And of course, there was the adrenaline dump. But one thing that I realized through practice was I did not get angry. But one of the things that we probably do, or I'm saying myself, is there are lots of times we had the fight or flight or the adrenaline dump, which I call fight or flight, because that's when stuff got real, is when you get the adrenaline dump. And we could call that multiple things. We probably call that one anger, because it's an extremely intense experience. And rather than just accepting the fact that we've had an adrenaline dump, it gives us the focus that we need to take proper actions at the time. And when it goes by, or when that's over with, all that's metabolized, you're back to normal. If you interpret it as anger, you're going to stay mad for a longer period of time, and then that causes all other things with the body. There are plenty of other examples that I could go on with. Like one is, just teaching physical fitness things. We start off and we're tired. But it's really your body, you might interpret as legs getting tired on the first part of a run. It's really just blood going to the legs, preparing you for it. So what you call it makes a big difference in what's going to happen 5 or 10 minutes later. that's kind of my. So I guess the big thing was labeling, and the situation can be exactly the same, and what you call it makes a big difference on what happens a couple of minutes later, because our reaction is going to be the same. It's what happens afterward that really makes the difference. That's my. You're muted, Bruce.
Thank you. Anybody like to comment on that? Well, I'd just like to say that, yeah, what we label things is important. Oftentimes often, maybe all the time, label is shorthand for us to try to wrap our head around a complex situation or complex person. I mean, they're gay. Okay, so we've labeled them. We can put them on the shelf now. We can put them on the gay shelf, or they're black. We can put them on the black shelf, and or I'm angry. Well, sometimes that's satisfactory to bring, as I believe Bill was saying, so to identify, okay, so what is this anger based on? Where did it come from? Well, I feel that emotion because of all that adrenaline that's been dumped, to borrow Bill's word, dumped in me. Got all this adrenaline going through my body, which heightens my emotions, my fear response, my anger response, all of these things. But if I focus on the actual circumstances, then maybe anger might not be the best response to all of that adrenaline. I don't know, I'm just thinking, what do you think, Bill?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think, because it's just the response is actually whatever is happening is a good thing. You can't go lackadaisically into a situation that requires immediate and intense action. So in some situations you can just call it anger, even if somebody is frustrating you. Of course that's going to happen if you understand it as that and not anger. That's anger is pretty intense, and it's not that you can. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. I understand the concept that I'm trying to get at, or what I realize. Putting it in words can be kind of can be kind of difficult.
Yeah, there are many shades of anger. That's why I gave you the feelings list.
Yeah.
Sometimes anger is a pretty strong emotion, but maybe sometimes we're just miffed, And there's a big difference. I don't know if miffed translates in Europe or not, but there's a big difference in emotional energy behind miffed and anger. Is miffed communicating to you folks in Europe? Yeah, I don't have everybody's picture up here, so I can't see all the heads nodding, but yeah, so miffed, okay? Or, so that's why I gave you the feeling list, so that you'll have better words than just putting everything in anger. I mean, anger's a pretty big can. It'll hold a lot, but maybe there's some stuff that doesn't go in there. So just like you sort out your recyclables from your garbage and from your trash. You've got garbage, food waste, perishable, spoilable things, and you got trash, which is, it'll be here for 1,000 years, and archaeologists will dig it up and wonder what the heck we were storing all this stuff for. But we're not storing it, we just made it indestructible. So that's trash. And then we've got recyclables, the things that we've convinced ourselves that somehow or another we can shred it and tear it up small enough and it'll be reusable, and which isn't always the case. But anyway, the theory is, so you've got those three things. Well, you just don't dump everything. Well, unless you're in an unregulated city. You just don't dump everything into garbage. You sort it out. I don't know. Do y'all sort things there in Europe? Yeah, okay, that's good. Europe is such an enlightened location. So many enlightened policies in Europe. So most places here in these states don't make that differentiation. Some do, but some don't. Um, but anyway, so just like you sort through all of that stuff that you want to get rid of, you want to get rid of anger, got to know which bin to put it in. So yeah, take a look at the feelings list. Find some other words for anger, you know? Miffed is a good one. One not very heard very often, but might cause a chuckle to somebody when you say, I'm pretty miffed right now. It'll kind of make them laugh, at least here in the States, because it's not that far gone from our vocabularies, but it's not that often used. So there's a lot of things that we just lump into anger because we don't have the label for it. We don't have the language for it. So again, take a look at your feeling list, okay? All right. David.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. Victoria, would you like to say something?
Just a quick one, quick question that one of the 3C is the compassion, yeah? And which is much required to have when in difficult situation. And 2 weeks ago, you did touch a bit on Jihi, the Buddhist Mercy, and you said a Buddhist as a spiritual power over others. Buddhist mercy is different from the traditional definition of compassion. And so I wanted to ask if there is a practical example of what the Buddha would do.
Yeah, so it sounded like things got a little bit jumbled up. Not the internet connection, but the retelling from my words. So so I'm not sure that I would say that Buddhism has, or Buddhist spiritual practice has power over others. We should really never think in terms of power over. Power with, yeah, but not power over. That gets into the realm of animality. So strike that from your list of things. And compassion is not so much different, actually, than Jihi. Jihi includes an element of compassion. Jihi is one way to manifest compassion from a Buddhist perspective. Okay, so let's see. Let's try to think of an example other than addictions, other than okay. I'm thinking here for a moment, if I can hold my train of thought. All right, so compassion. Compassion. So say someone in your office is a notorious paperclip stealer. And I would include office supplies. So they're notorious for stealing office supplies from the office. And many people consider that not a crime, but it is theft. And part of our 6 paramitas is to take what is not freely given. And freely is an important word there because coercion and, I can't think of the other word when we force somebody to do something. Anyway, so they're a serial office supply stealer. They're continually stealing office supplies, and you spot them doing it. Now, there's a lot of ways that you could act. You could try to cover up for them so that they won't get caught. That might be thought of compassion because you're saving them the suffering of getting caught, potentially losing their job. definitely some embarrassment. So covering up for them, might seem a compassionate act. But if the choice was to allow them to be caught and covering up for them, it could be argued that the truly compassionate response is to allow them to be caught. Now, that may seem like you're an asshole, the rear end of a horse, because you could protect them, but you're choosing not to. You're allowing them, and again, your heart has to be compassion. I want them to be able to change their life. I want them to be able to right their wrongs. And if we cover up for someone, they never address, they never confront the theft, they never confront the wrong that they're doing. Eventually they will experience someone who won't cover up for them, who will have great delight and joy in them getting caught. Nah, 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 nah. That kind of thing. But we as Buddhists need to cultivate the compassion that we hope that they can learn their lesson. And so we allow them to be caught. It could be argued that even to facilitate the catching could be. But again, that's a fine line between trying to stick it to them and trying to help them. A fine line between revenge or compassion. But if we allow them to be caught and refuse to cover up for them, they're going to suffer, yes. And we could say, well, we don't want to cause other people to be suffering. But again, this gets back into my river of tears kind of thing. They can shed a few tears now and it's a stream. But if their life devolves into a life of a compulsive thief and begin to justify and steal all kinds of other things, then when they get caught, they're going to be crying a whole river and not just a little creek or a little stream. So again, it's doing the greatest good while causing the least harm. You really have to think about that. The person may lose their job. Yes, that's unfortunate. To lose a job now and to correct one's ways and then get a better job or get another job and cherish it and respect it is a life lesson that's well worth living and learning, I think. And that is what Buddhist Jihi is about. Does that make sense, Victoria? So you have a child who's, like my brother, okay? This isn't who he is, but it is who he was when he was a young teenage boy. He would break into neighbors' houses and steal things. He got caught. And my parents refused to cover for him. My parents refused to go bail him out. My parents refused to stand up for him in any way whatsoever. And he went to court. Back then, when we had the draft, you could, oftentimes judges would sentence young boys. They'd give them a choice between volunteering to go in the military or jail. My brother chose the military and really turned his life around, became an outstanding, stellar person, raised two beautiful girls, and I'm not meaning physically necessarily, but beautiful spirit, kind girls, hardworking girls, girls with good ethics, grandchildren, great-grandchildren now. And so he had to learn a lesson. Somebody is going to teach him. And so that's G, to be able to allow someone to learn the greater lesson. If my parents had covered for him, then the lesson they would be teaching him is that somebody's going to pull your pan out of the fire. And we know that that's not always the case. You know, it's like my parents, they had a hard and fast rule. Don't ask to borrow money from them. You know, there was one time I was in deep financial straits. It was, you know, the economy had turned bad. I was really suffering. And I knew that I could not ask my parents for any help. And so I went hungry and, you know, almost lost my apartment. And eventually I managed to work my way out of it. I'm not sure. I mean, there was a lot of life lessons learned along the way. Like, okay, to get to my job, I had to take the bus every morning. Well, the bus cost me $0.25. Okay, but I like these little rum cakes that this bakery would make. It's hard to find good rum cake. And the rum cakes were $1.25. And so what I did is I walked the 3 miles to work every day so that I could save the $0.25 bus fare, because I'd get a ride home at the end of work. So I could save the bus fare so that on Friday, I could go treat myself to rum cake at the bakery, okay? So I don't know if that's an important life lesson or not, but so that's G. Does that flesh that out a little bit more for you? Does that add a little bit more meat to it, create greater understanding, Victoria?
My take is that always to think what is the best thing for the other person's development and future development. And so I don't think you can decide in advance the course of action, but just to feel in the moment and follow, you know, what would be the Buddha compassion to do, what would be best for that person.
Yeah. I know for myself, I would really struggle with allowing a young person to go to jail right now. That would weigh heavily on my conscience. I don't know, you know, I don't have a specific situation, so I'm hypotheticals again, or squishy, wiggly little things to try and put your finger on. But it does concern me. You know, it's like my neighbors are very loud and boisterous, and exceedingly so, and annoyingly so. And this is not the time to call the police. The police is the only thing I can call for noise disturbances. So I have to put up with it. Are they learning anything? No, they're not learning respect. They're not learning to hold their voices down. If the police show up, yeah, they would learn that because they know that every time they get loud, I'm going to call the police. But this is not the time to be calling the police. They're Black. This is not the time to be calling police on Black people for nonviolent things. That's my take. Now, that might not be everybody's, and that's not a hard and fast rule, and I'm not saying everybody should adhere to that. But that's my views. So yes, no, we can't say that in this situation I will always do this. No, every situation is different. Yeah. Greatest good, least harm. Greatest good, least harm. Davey, turn it back.
Sorry, I was writing that down. Greatest good. What was it? Greatest good, least harm. Least harm. I like that. Least harm. Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you. Morning, Alice. Morning, Beatrice. How are you? You got a question?
Which one?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Beatrice.
I'm fine. Yesterday I was with children, 4 children, and their parents, and they are very active and very full of energy. And most of the time they are fighting each other. And as you know, children are only on the feeling level. It's difficult. They aren't 10. The eldest is 8, 6, 4, 3, and 4 months. And everyone wants something at the same time. So full of feelings.
More like emotions. It's all emotions.
Yes, emotions. But what's the difference? What's the difference between emotion and feeling?
Well, we're talking about feeling in the context of this conversation. We're
Yes.
talking about feelings as identifying how we're feeling.
Yes.
If we're just dealing on the level of emotions, then there's no analytical process going on. Now, if you look in Webster's, that distinction is not going to be there. So in the context of our conversation, emotions, and it's pretty much, I think, universal that child psychologists use the word emotions. Again, there's no processing. It's just letting the emotions out. There's no context for a child. There's no processing. There's no analysis of whether this is an appropriate emotion or not. There's very little, if any, thought given to how my emotions impact other people, how my emotions. So emotions is much more raw. Not wrong or anything, it's just in the context, clarifying in the context of our conversation around nonviolent communication, where feeling is something that we identify within ourselves. And I'm guessing that the children didn't do any of that.
No,
So we talk about emotions.
so okay. So it's okay. I don't know what to say. Thank
Well,
you.
here, how in the midst of all of that, how were your emotions and what were your feelings?
Very confused because everything is so quick. Everything happens so quickly, so it's difficult to have an analytic view on the situation. You can see that something small, and it's a war situation because it's very important for each child, but you can't respond to each of them, and you need to quiet them because otherwise it could be dangerous for them.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of violence.
Yeah, they
A
don't think
lot
like,
of anger as well.
yeah, they don't think like we do they?
Sorry?
I said they do not, children do not think like adults, do they?
No, they think they are right.
Always,
They want for them.
and they also think they're important.
Yes.
Yeah. Their little pet peeve is the most important pet peeve in the whole world. And that everything is life and death. I mean, they might not talk in terms of life and death, but it has to get solved right away. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And generally, I mean, again, not having had any children, you know, only dogs. But for a dog, the training technique is to get them in a quiet space. Don't argue with the dog. Don't fight the dog. Just put it in a quiet space. And about 20 minutes later, everything's fine. And sometimes for children, I do know anecdotally from other people that quiet time can be just as therapeutic as trying to solve these complex emotional things. I don't know, parents, speak up. Neil, you've got two daughters. They're
I do.
beyond the pure emotions stage, but not
Not by much.
Yeah.
Not by much. And you know, there's always a dynamic there where the child, you know, wants something, but I think it is miraculous when the logical part of their brain starts to kick in and they start to process things more logically. But when they're still in that emotional phase, I just have to give them a ton of space, right? And just let them be in this excited mode, because trying to constrain that is just not, it's just going to make them unhappy. It's not going to teach them anything. They're not really processing deeper consequences. So it's very tricky. It's very hard.
You know, with a dog, if you get mad at it and try to punish it, it just gets angry back. And it may even try to bite you. It doesn't mean to, but it's already devolved into strictly emotions. And, you know, dogs have less complex thought processes than people, but pretty similar to children in many ways. Just, you know, I would make my dog sit, and I'd have her sit under the table, and then I'd walk off. I'd tell her to stay. And about 20 minutes later, she'd come slinking into the living room, glancing up at me to see if I'm going to yell at her. And I just pet her. You know. And so I know you can't do that necessarily with children, but the same sort of thing is sometimes you just let it play out. You know, separate them if necessary. If they're causing harm to each other, separate them. Don't take sides, because that's a losing situation. I think you know that already. But separate them, reduce stimulation, turn off TV, video games, give them a book if they want something, make them stay in their room. Not angry, but just as a parent, just allowing them to take the medicine that they need. Again, you're not, get in your room, but I think it's time that we have a timeout. So again, they're not bad people because they're at the emotive state. They're just undeveloped. I don't know. Beatrice, what are your thoughts?
Yes, you're right. You're
Not
right.
necessarily.
No, it's true. Maybe the problem was that with those children, we have to take care of them usually when the parents are out, and that time we were with the parents, and they act differently, and so sometimes I felt that I won't have done like them. So maybe that's why I was a bit confused about the attitude, because the children couldn't hear at me because of the parents. Of course, the parents are at home, so they are more right than I.
Yeah. That's a complicated dynamic, and whether one agrees with the parenting policies or not, as the non-parent, you have to just,
to mute.
you know, but on your own, you can use strategies for maintaining order without discipline. They're going to push they're going to try every strategy they know to push your buttons. They don't like you, you know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. You're not their parents. They're going to see how much they can get away with. It's sort of like the substitute teacher in school. And it's like, how much can I get away with the substitute teacher? You know, can I not turn in my homework and not get punished? So, you know, it's somewhat like that. You have to understand that and realize it, that, you know, sometimes the softer approach, because you're not really there to discipline them. You're just there to keep them from killing themselves. You know. Oh. N'est-ce pas?
Oui.
It's hard. Children are complicated. It's a wonder. It's a wonder the human species continues.
Thank you, Beatrice. I guess, yeah. I was thinking, when I practice or try to practice non-violent communication, when I go through the 4 elements, it takes a lot of time. It takes me a lot of time. And it's even, there's ones added, I think, because I go to observe without judgment. Before that, I kind of had to check myself because I observe with judgment. And then I have to think about it and then observe without judgment. And it just takes a long time. And before I get to the end, the situation might have gone or be over, or I'm kind of met with like anger, and I'm unsure. I get 2 things, I guess. Unsure about what to do with that anger, how to meet that, and also, is there any way of speeding up the process? I guess are my questions.
Yeah, speeding up is important.
Yeah.
It has to become reflex. And the only way to do that is to do them one step at a time. I know there's a lot of energy to, let's do this. Looks like it'll work. But if you're continually frustrated by trying to implement it, then eventually you're going to say, well, this is impossible. And you'll give up. You know, I mean, maybe not now, but later, say it's just too much trouble, it doesn't work. So it's really, really crucial to do the steps. Observation should just be reflex. This happened. This isn't my interpretation of it. This isn't my values attached to it. Just this happened. And then how do I feel? Quickly. So one thing at a time. Observation. Get that down. And then feelings. Get those down. Develop a rich feeling vocabulary. Lots of feeling words. The more feeling words, the better. And you can kind of work on those at the same time. But get those 2 down pat. I mean, they can happen just like that. Sometimes there might be a pause or a delay, but eventually it'll just come to you just like that with practice. Now, if you don't practice, if you don't do it in an orderly fashion, then it's going to be haphazard and not as effective. And there's a couple of things you mentioned in there that sometimes the whole situation just goes away. That's not so bad. That's not so bad when it goes away. Not always. Sometimes it's not necessarily good, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So it may go away. Sometimes, if you're so late coming to all the processes, the other person say, "Why are you bringing that up again now?" You know, and then they get resentful. It's like, I let that go yesterday. It's sort of like the story of the 2 monks who took a vow of silence and celibacy, walking through the woods. They come to a bridge, or a stream rather. There's no bridge. They come to the stream, and there's this naked woman trying to cross the stream, and she's trying to get across, and she can't do it. So one brother picks her up and carries her to the other side, delicately deposits her, and continues walking on. And the other brother says, "I can't believe you did that. How could you violate your vows of celibacy and picking up that naked woman?" And so the other monk doesn't say anything, and he just keeps walking. A couple of days later, the monk says, I still can't believe you did that. Why did you do that? How is it possible?" And the guy looks at him and says, "That was 2 days ago. I put the woman down by the stream, but you're still carrying her." You know?
Yeah.
It's sort of like Trump with Obama. I mean, there wasn't even an election between the two. but Trump can't quit carrying Obama. And so, you know, I got off topic. But do the steps. Let them become, they can become lightning fast inside you. You've got a lot of history, previous ways of doing things that you're going to have to overcome. You know, I mean, probably your first steps are, okay, you'll revert back to your old patterns of behavior, your old patterns of assessment, judgment, and then you'll pause that, you'll realize what you're doing, and you'll go back and try and sort that all out. Eventually you can train yourself to not use those old behavior patterns and to just default to an observation. And the way I did it first is I just focused on driving. You know, I've joked around about teaching enlightenment by driving, but that was kind of my approach. That's where that was the crucible where I put all the ingredients and in the alchemical process of extracting the gold from all of that lead, the enlightenment from all of that crap. So, you know, if it helps, pick out one thing. I don't know that it will. You might not have one thing, but, you know, here in the States, we're always driving someplace, especially when I was younger. Drive to work, drive home from work, drive to lunch, drive back to work from lunch, drive to the grocery store. I mean, everything is happening in a car. No public transportation worth beans. And so you drive everywhere. Well, a pretty big portion of my time, my daily life, was consumed with driving. So a lot of things would happen. You know, I get people trying. There would be potential side swipes. There'd be cutoffs. There'd be, you know, all kinds of stuff behind me honking because I'm not doing something that they want them to do. And so that's where I started. I learned to make an observation without judgment. And that's the first thing I did. I just processed it. Because before I learned nonviolent communication, I'd say, okay, well, I don't want to be the person with the finger out the window. That's not exactly the behavior of a Buddha. And so what I would try to do is I would suppress the emotions. I still had the judgment because that's where the emotions would come from. Still had the judgment. The guy is definitely an asshole. You know, that guy woke up first thing in the morning and put on his agenda, number one checklist item is find Rusho and drive him off the road. I know he did that, as insane as that sounds. So the first thing I learned to do was to observe without emotions, without judgment. Just do that. And I found when I did that I didn't have that acid in my stomach. I didn't have that boiling, you know, reflux or, you know, indigestion. I wasn't, you know, the tension melted away. So I took my observation out of the equation and let go of my negative energies. So that was a real eye-opener for me because I'd been struggling with what do I do with these emotions? Okay, I didn't stick my finger out the window. I applied the brake. I didn't honk my horn. I didn't yell and scream at the guy, but all of that was still going on inside of me. I just wasn't physically manifesting it. Well, that's like, I don't know, you got a garden hose and you bend it And the pressure builds up and the pressure builds up. And if it's an old hose that's been outside for a little while, it blows up, you know? So that was my first, I guess you could say, breakthrough, was when those experiences went away. I didn't try and eliminate them necessarily. I just did something different. Now, nonviolent communication gave me the strategy for doing it. I don't know that I ever would have come up with that on my own. And then I began to understand what my feelings were. And I began to understand what my needs were. My primary need in all of the situations was safety. And then I looked at request. And we're not there yet, so don't jump ahead. Take your time, okay? So my request. Well, I can only make a request to one person, that's me. The other person is either long gone or in his other car, and I can't stop in the middle of the road and chase after him on foot. So I'm the one that's responsible for my safety. He may not even know what he did. It might be an accident. I don't know that. I know I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I am not perfect. But usually when we get into that observation with judgment, we're thinking that person's an asshole, and I'm not an asshole. I'm a nice Buddhist guy. You know, well, that's BS. You know. So yeah, try not to rush ahead. Try not to get ahead of yourself. Take the steps. You know, it could take 10 or more weeks just focusing on one thing before it begins to shift within you. So be patient. Be patient. Be committed to it. Be dedicated to it, and be patient.
Yeah. Oh well, thank you. It makes sense. Anyone else? Victoria, did you want to say something?
Just a quick one. You remember when you explained the introductory chapter, and my understanding is, as a Buddhist, it's like we take the journey of the Shavaka learning, yeah, and when we go beyond the world of heaven, we just begin to see the working in the six realms or path, and it should help, you know, with communication, because it should give a little bit of a clearer idea where the other person is, and at least you know what you're dealing with.
I think so. So I guess the things that stood out to me when you were speaking about that is, first off, I probably don't remember what I was talking about, but that's a failing of my mind now as I'm getting older. But Sravaka, it's not bad. It's cautionary, in my view. Sravaka can be a dead end, in that you get trapped in this mindset that all the answers are written down. If I just find the book where it is, I'll be able to move on to the next problem. And that's not accurate. So, you know, in my example of saying that the other person possibly could have just made a mistake. Well, and then the other point that, well, I make mistakes. So we're both humans. Neither of us are perfect. So I'm creating space for another human to exist in my universe. I'm not sure, I mean, I don't want to mince these up too fine, but that's not necessarily a Shravaka activity. Now, studying nonviolent communication is definitely a Shravaka activity because we're learning something. But if we just are merely learning something and we don't apply it, and this is what Bodhisattva is how do we apply this? The Shravaka discovered it. The Shravaka in me discovered it, felt it was valuable, and then looked at it. The Shravaka isn't necessarily going to be well equipped for applying it.
Mm.
So then the Bodhisattva in me says, well, how can I use this? How can I apply it in the perspective of Buddhism? So, and again, these 10 worlds are not rigid containers. You know, they're just, in a way, they're like every label. They're just shorthand. They're just a means to try to grapple with the complexity of life. No one is any one thing their entire life. We might have certain tendencies. I know there's some people that tend towards intellectualism, and that's something that, I mean, I certainly like intellectual things. I like studying things. I like the theories, but that's not a motivator for me. So even when I'm in that realm of Shravaka, I'm not fully in it as a Shravaka. There are nuances there because I'm constantly trying to think, okay, well, what does that do to my heart? What can I do with this? How can I share this with other people? That's not a priority for a Shravaka necessarily. So again, I you know, the 10 realms as we teach it can be a tool. When we try to make everything hard and fast and fit into certain square pegs and square holes and all that kind of stuff, then it can become a weapon because there's so many gray areas. There's so many nuances. There are 3,000 realms, you know, and it's not meant to be used as an analytical tool, but a means by which we can understand ourselves better and grow into that bodhisattva and eventually become enlightened. Does that make sense?
Yes, I meant the Shavraka as a beginning to the journey to become a bodhisattva and eventually enlightened. Is the first step, but is when.
Well, actually, no. I need to clarify that because it's not. In chapter 2, we learned that the 3 vehicles are contained in the single vehicle of Buddhahood. We don't all begin at Shravaka. You may, and that's fine, but it's not a first step. It's not the first step. The first step is enlightenment. And all of those vehicles are necessary. The Buddha didn't deny any of them. He didn't put any of them as second or third or first. He said they're all required. Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, Bodhisattva, all of those things in harmony are what comprise Buddhahood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I only meant that because that was the beginning. At the beginning, my understanding was that the assembly at Eagle Peak, it was the voice era that went, and then gradually, you develop. Anyway, I think we've gone off topic.
Again, because this is being
I think
recorded.
I've gone off topic.
That's okay, because it's being recorded. We do not know that it was only the Shravakas that went to that assembly. In fact, there's greater evidence. Animality was there, Bodhisattvas were there, Pratyeka Buddhas were there, hell beings, animals, all of those were present. So again, I wonder if there's a tendency to try to make everything fit into a container or a label, rather than saying that all of those were present. All of those were present. They weren't necessarily, Shravaka wasn't necessarily predominant over the animals. Shravaka wasn't necessarily predominant over any of them. And that's why in chapter 2, we learned that there is no separate vehicles. They're all required for Buddhahood. So, a person whose proclivities lean towards intellectualism needs to be aware that it also requires Pratyeka Buddha, self-analysis, self-awareness, as well as action, manifestation of the doctrine or the teaching one understands through bodhisattva, that all of those things are required in equal measure to attain enlightenment. So anyway, just a little bit of clarification there. I don't know if it helps or not, but yeah, I just don't want others to misunderstand. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. Beatrice, do you want to say anything else before we finish? Beatrice, would you like to say anything else?
Yes. Thanks to your explanation about children and parents, or maybe we can do analogy with the parable of the burnt house, because the Buddha has the father before he found the way to get the children out. He just observed the situation with no emotion, with no, and then he found the way to get them out. So may we do the comparison with the non-violent communication, to observe the fact. Of course, he had the feeling that it's very dangerous situation, so he was afraid that someone could die. But then he found the need to get the children out.
Yeah, but I think in the beginning there was a lot of emotion. He had a ton of emotion in that he wanted to rush in and carry them out. His wisdom informed him that he couldn't carry all of them out. He could only carry some out. And then he had the idea that he'd put them on a tabletop and bring them out like on a sled. Yeah, and being driven by fear of the death of his children. But then he had the wisdom that, no, that won't fit through the gate. That won't fit through the door. So that's pointless. So then he let all of those emotions subside, not go away, but not cloud his judgment. So, when we react to people who say, like children, and they're all emotional and they're high energy and they're running around screaming and yelling, and we would just want to lash out and say, shut up. All that does is feed into their energy and just makes a big, big explosion. Or at least with my dog, it would. So maybe children are different, but I think that children are somewhat the same. But the parent is responsible for taking control of the situation. putting their emotions aside, putting their frustrations aside, putting their anger aside. And what do I need to do? Well, I need to separate these sort of like atoms, boom, 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 going around and banging into each other and causing small, I think you said it, nuclear explosions. You know, so what do I need to do? I need to get those atoms separate. You know, so yeah, I do think there was emotion there. I think that eventually the father was able to put those emotions in one place and allow his wisdom to manifest so that he could realize, well, I could give them wonderful gifts and toys and entice them to come out. Bye, Victoria. Thanks for being here today. We'll see you next time. So how can I entice them to come out? You know, because let's get them out on their own power, because I don't have enough power. And again, this gets into when we do proselytizing or propagation, again, that's just our mind over someone else's mind. The Buddha, you know, when the Buddha wanted to carry the kids out, that's like, I got to convert everybody, that kind of mentality. And especially there's nothing to convert. They're already Buddhas. So it's that kind of power over. I'm the parent here. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to carry you out, whether you want to come or not. Well, but that's a fool's mission because he couldn't carry them all out. We can't propagate to everybody. So anyhow, just some thoughts on that. What do you think?
Yes, true. We can't convert every. It's a freedom for everyone to choose or not. We just have to find the appropriate words and attitude to help people to be happy with them. Or to solve the situation, to solve their problem.
Yeah.
I would say.
Bring out the dessert tray. Show them all the wonderful things in the Lotus Sutra, all the wonderful truths, and all the happiness that's arisen in your life. So bring out the desserts. Davey.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you have anything, Davey?
No, I had nothing else to say. No. Yeah, no, I don't. No. Kind of just drawn a blank, but yeah, I was thinking, I like the parable of the burning house, because you're right, you can't save everyone, you can't propagate to everyone, but if you look at it that everyone is a Buddha, everyone has Buddha, and everyone treat them with compassion, then that's at least the seed is planted, and whether they take it up or not, you know, it's show them the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if I try to convert somebody and, you know, I'm not saying that it's wrong for someone to change their religion, or it's definitely not wrong to show them the beauty of the Lotus Sutra. Chapter 22, however, tells us that if they can't accept the Lotus Sutra, if they can't accept the truths in the Lotus Sutra, then show them another teaching. Cause and effect is the most fundamental Buddhist teaching that exists in every religion. People don't call it that, but you know, I can go to heaven if I do something. If I espouse or profess belief in Jesus Christ as my Savior, then I can go to heaven. So that's a cause and effect situation. Science is based on cause and effect. That is a Buddhist principle. So, you know, we can we can approach it that way. But you know, when we're trying to, we open up all the books and we say, yes, but here it says this and here it says that, and we try to mentally subdue someone, then it's our mind power over their mind power. That's not a healthy relationship, because it's a dominance and subordinate. We've got one power of the dominant, one power of the subordinate. That's not a respectful situation. That's not Buddhist practice. It doesn't exist in the Lotus Sutra. So, and you know, if we believe the Lotus Sutra that all beings possess Buddhahood, then it's already done. Our role is just to show them something in the Lotus Sutra. If they don't accept it, show them something else that the Buddha taught. It's easy. Present our life of joy and value, present it to others, allow them to partake if they choose, offer them the various ox carts and horse carts and bull carts, and let them run out of the burning house. So a little bit of a mixed parables there, but anyway. Well, how about we wrap it up? Chant Odaimoku 3 times together. And I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all the people who've had to leave along the way. I want to thank them for being here as well. So let us close by chanting Odaimoku. Is that okay? All right. I'll take that as a yes. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Tomorrow we're beginning week 15. Yeah, week 15 of our COVID prayers. So we'll continue with that. All right. Bye. A bientôt. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Thank you.
Bye.